Salete, mihi nomen est Stella et hoc est Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 195 for August MMXX. Batgirl to Oracle is brought to you by the Batman Universe and Action Film Face Off. Batgirl the Oracle is also brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So, if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out milehighcomics.com. Sorry, I've already started laughing, which I'm sure I lost a bet, or you may drink if you need to, because I know that was one of the things of how long will it take me to laugh. This is weird because I'm on my own. I was thinking about Poison Ivy in the best Batman film ever, Batman and Robin, where she says, of course, this is a one woman show. And that's what I feel like it is right now. There have just been lots of guests. And while I do love guests, it's also fatiguing. Just sort of the preparation and getting everything together and editing and all of that stuff. And so I just needed a bit of a break. So I'm alone. But the thing with being alone is everything falls on me. I feel like I make less mistakes if there are guests. If I want to talk about something off the cuff and I'm alone, I can edit it in audio if I say something wrong or something that I shouldn't have said. The video, it's a bit like, uh-oh, it's there, because that's the positive thing, or the great thing, I guess, for you guys as viewers, that you get the unedited video format. And then, of course, you can hear what I changed. But here we are. Yeah. So what's funny is I actually want to start off this podcast talking about The Last of Us Part 2. And I'm sure a lot of you are actually groaning right now because you're thinking, wow, she just talked about it for 6 hours on a podcast and a video cast. What more does she possibly have to say? And I do have to, I'm going to speak for Harold, but I feel like he and I could have talked even longer on that. I feel like I could have talked for 12 hours on that. I could have gone step by step, bit by bit, act and scene and all of that stuff. But we didn't. I mean, I honestly only planned to have a 3-hour podcast, and it doubled. And I was actually surprised. He wasn't, it seemed, which was really funny. I thought, oh, 3 hours is that, but it happened to be 6 hours. But the thing with this game is I'm still thinking about it. And I think for those that didn't fall into the trap of the leaks, that I feel like, again, I'm speaking for multiple people, that their lives were affected in some way. And it's not a game that you just turn off and put away. And yes, I've turned it off. I have actually put it away back in its collection box, but I'm still thinking about it. So there are just a couple things that I want to say about it. If you are looking for my rage quit, which I did advertise on Twitter and Instagram, I suppose, which I guess is technically clickbait, but here we are. It is going to be the part 2 of the video, and I have no idea. Future Stella is going to take a guess and say that it's 8 minutes into part 2, but we'll see about that. And I actually lied to you guys, so I have to apologize, because I said I was going to record yesterday, Friday, and it's actually Saturday. But I went on a 40-mile bike ride, and when I got back, well, my legs were screaming, to be honest, but I was exhausted. And the thing about the 40-mile bike ride, there have been times where I have worn a safety vest and had my phone and listened to music, but now I've gotten to the point where the safety, it's just too much because it's too hot, and it's just another thing I don't need to wear. I'm trying to figure out some way that I can have music going, but I was just left with 3 hours, because it took me 3 hours of contemplating things, and I felt like I almost exhausted my energy from that. And I was just contemplating what I was going to say in 2 particular parts of the Last of Us discussion that I'm about to have. But I got home and I thought it'll be okay. Had some food for fuel and thought, okay, let's do this. I couldn't do it. I was so exhausted and my middle finger hurts really badly. It's better today. It sounds weird. Like, what have you been doing, Stella? Flicking people off? No. But something happened and it must have been because I noticed it right after I accidentally dropped my water bottle. So I'm on the way and on a two-way highway and I took some water and I tried to put it back in its holster and it did not go back in and it popped out. And so I had to stop immediately, go off the road and then wait for traffic to come and get my water bottle. But after that, it felt like, so I don't know if I jammed my middle finger or not, but it was just hurting. And I thought, I'm going to be tapping around the computer and do I need this? I mean, it still hurts, but anyways, here we are. So that was why. So I apologize for lying, but it's Saturday. So at least it's not like 1 week later, she finally decided to record this episode. Yeah. Okay. So Last of Us Part 2. Donovan, I will say props to this guy that he finished Last of Us Part 1. He actually sent a text message to me of credits, and I could tell right away what the credits were for, and I called him immediately, and we chatted a bit about that, and then he ended up watching, I think mostly watching the episode that I did with Harold. And he said, I thought this was a funny quote, finally finished BTO. I've never heard such foul language from you or the podcast. And my guest on the next episode, I won't say what his name is, but I was talking to him about this next episode we're doing, which is on a book I received called Politics in Gotham. And he was asking me, like, to what extent should we explore, I guess, really bipartisanship or our political beliefs and things like that. And so I let them know that I just don't really talk about politics on this particular podcast. And I'll let them know that, your viewpoints, guest, do not reflect the viewpoints of Batgirl Oracle as a whole. And he says, that seems fair, but let me note that you have explicit content on your show, but not politics. I see. And I said, I had one episode with explicit content because I was using clips with swears. And he said, are you sure it wasn't you with the swears? And I said, I said a few by quoting. He said, quoting your own vitriol. And I said, exactly, because really what was going to stop him. So anyways, some fun stuff. But I know that people with my show, I mean, this is, it's bait for everybody, right? That everyone thinks I'm going to have a really long podcast. I mean, someone actually just yesterday or something, pretty sure my coffee nemesis said something about 7-hour podcast. And so that's just whatever, I'm used to it by now. So I know that 6-hour podcast, which is practically probably an audio book, depending on the size of the book, it's super long. And also, if you're not really interested in The Last of Us, why listen to it? But I will say I'm actually pretty proud of that. I just felt like, the clips and adding that sort of stuff. And I felt like our discussion was really good. So I hope you do give it a shot, but I can understand if you didn't. But I do have some more things to say, of course. So first of all, gosh, I started off on a completely terrible, informed foot by saying, who the heck is Jerry? And I found out who Jerry was, and I texted Harold immediately and I said, do you remember Jerry? He said, oh, did you figure out who it is? It's the friggin' surgeon. I don't know, if I guess maybe he was called Jerry in the flashbacks, but surgeon, Dr. Anderson, I would have totally known. Abby's father. Yikes. So that was who Jerry was. So I just wanted to start off correcting that. No one has said anything to me, which is fine, probably because no one's listened, but there we go. I want to talk about sales. Even though you would think that it would have failed given everything, perhaps it incited more. So in its release weekend, The Last of Us sold over 4 million copies worldwide, becoming the fastest selling PlayStation 4 exclusive, beating Marvel's Spider-Man 3.3 million and God of War's 3.1 million in the same period. It was the best-selling game of June and became the third best-selling game of the year within 2 weeks, generating the highest first-month sales of the year. In the UK, it became the fastest selling physical PlayStation 4 game, outselling previous record holder Uncharted 4 by at least 1% and The Last of Us by 76%. In Japan, it was the best selling game during its first week, selling an estimated 178 1,696 physical copies, and in Germany, it sold over 200,000 copies in June 2020. So the leaks didn't stop it. And then Metacritic changes. This happened recently, specifically with Ghost of Tsushima. It now makes users, Metacritic, makes users wait more than 36 hours after release to start posting reviews, deeming that adequate time to believably play the game. And of course, this is coming from The Last of Us because people were posting within a time that would have been impossible. You just could not have beat the game within that amount of time. It was lower, it was below 24 hours. And so, of course, we know that people were review bombing. And so this is great. Probably, I asked myself, why didn't Metacritic do this earlier? But honestly, Metacritic probably believed or had faith in humanity more so than it, I suppose, needed. But it always takes one, right? So I'm glad. I'm sad that it was The Last of Us Part 2, but I'm glad that Metacritic took what happened and learned from it, and now future games can benefit from this particular thing. So those are the two. Now a longer discussion, two long discussions, longish. One is on the sex scene again, yes, and then I want to talk about the Seraphites again, and religious warning, that I will be talking some Christianity with the Seraphites. So if you need to fast forward there, and then just something that I missed or I should have talked about. One of my, and I think this is true of a lot of people, but one of my weaknesses, I would say, is that I feel like I'm pretty quick. I'm pretty good with sarcasm. If I have confrontations or maybe a discussion that doesn't involve anger or things like that, I will come back afterwards and think, man, I should have said this, and then I really focus on that, and almost to like a toxic level that I just need to move past it. And so something that I've been trying to do better about is leaving stuff, try to do the best you can, leave it all there, especially with auditions. That was one of my goals this 2019-2020 season, which of course I got a part, which was great, at this local theater, but just like leave everything on that audition floor and don't, no regrets, and don't rethink everything and go through. It's just not, I feel like it's not healthy. Unfortunately, with podcasting and certain discussions that I have that mean a lot to me, I come back afterwards and think, oh man, what about this, and this? And with The Last of Us, again, it could have been a 12-hour podcast, honestly, no joke, because there were so many things I want to talk about and some things that I left out that I really want to talk about more. And so I'm going to give myself some time now to talk about it. Okay, so first of all, the sex scene. And I did bring it up, obviously. I shouldn't say obviously. I did bring it up with Harold. And the one time I think that I was dissatisfied with Harold's answer was this. I think were I to boil down his answer, he's just like, meh, it's a sex scene, sex happens, it's a life stuff, that's it. But there's something that just bothers me about it, and specifically the Abby and Owen sex scene. I think the reason why, I think, is because I am comparing it to the other sex scene, and I'll say with quotations because we don't know with Ellie and Dina. Maybe, I mean, the assumption, they definitely made out, and they disrobe to a certain extent, but they have their clothing on, whereas it's explicit in multiple ways with Abby and Owen. The fact that you see the thrusting, the penetration, I don't know how to say that, and then the after math of it, that under the blankets, and sort of the cliche, you can tell someone has slept together, whereas with Ellie and Dina you can't, though it is cold, so maybe they put their clothes back on, I don't know. So internally, I think about this in two different ways, internally and externally. Like internally within the game and the scene and the narrative and all that stuff, and then externally what's sort of happening here. So with Dina and Ellie, we already had a sense that there was shipping with the two of them. So I think there's something already inherently there that emotionally I think we have a connection, especially if you're with Ellie. I think you already have a connection. And for me personally, because I'm a huge shipper, right? But I don't ship everybody. Like there has to be a feeling there. I did feel emotionally connected to that particular couple. It's that whole scene is really well written and well animated. I've rewatched it several times just because I enjoy it. I like the nuances of the facial features and how they're interacting, especially when Dina's asking, how would you rate our kiss, and just sort of the uncomfort or discomfiture that Ellie is feeling, and Dina to a certain extent, I feel like too, she's being coy as well. And we cut off. So I'm like, okay, so it's trying to think about this here. So see, that's the problem with the video, is that you will not hear all of this on the audio. We don't need to see everything. So let me just put that out there. We can have that assumption of whatever, like we see the kiss and then it cuts off. Okay, that's fine. And I'm thinking about, because I don't need sex scenes for titillation, especially like lesbian sex scenes or whatever, because I think you don't want to feed the audience that necessarily. And I think about also just like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you get a lot, but there's nothing explicit and you're told enough, but it's more about the relationship, and how the two are together. And you are, in many ways, it's about, of course, the female gaze, and the male gaze is going to want to see everything, right? So I look at that and I'm like, great. But then when you start to compare it with the Abby and Owen, there's just weird stuff going on. Now, number one, I don't feel connected to Owen. And even by the end of the game, I still don't really feel connected to him. And that's perhaps me. I think there must be some sort of failure in the game as well, because Harold felt, the same way. And that whole scene is really about creating empathy towards him, better understanding, because that's when he's describing his interaction with this Seraphite. And then he realizes, like, look at how far I've gone from a firefly to a wolf and what's happened and all of that stuff. So you should feel emotionally connected to him, but I do not. I don't feel connected to Abby at that moment either, because that's day one, maybe. It's not, it's definitely it's day one. It's day one Seattle, I'm pretty sure. It's before she goes back. She has helped Lev and Yara, but she's not gone back for them. So there's not that connection there. So this is early on in that journey. Maybe people have grasped onto her yet. I haven't, though I do very much love her at the end, but it's very much a journey with me and her as a player. And I think that's how it is. So now you have this sex scene between two characters that you don't probably have an emotional connection with. So that's already a separation. Um, it's violent, I would say. I mean, it obviously starts off in a physical confrontation with her. She had shoved him, and then he grabs her by the hair. It's back to front rather than a front to front, which is interesting. Obviously, sexual poses, we don't really need to get into that, but I feel like there is, I'm thinking about Game of Thrones, right? With Daenerys and Count Drogo. Cal Drogo. What? It's been so long. Let's just call him Drogo. I'm pretty sure it's Drogo. I don't know why I said Count though. Count Drogo. Does such a character exist? Anyways, that was all right. That whole thing for longest time was front to back, and then once it turned around, like their relationship also turned around. So there's some symbolism there, and the other thing is, like, they do not cut screen. They could have stopped after her shirt was off and then she was turned around, but they go through, they continue with the thrusting and everything. And I just don't understand why. I don't know why continue with that. So that's the internal comparison, obviously, is that emotionally one is great and one really isn't. I can't really get behind that. And then the external is you've got your lesbian scene versus your heterosexual scene. Is there something there? Did you do that for that sort of purpose? um I don't know, it just, I can't put my finger on it, quite honestly. It's an artistic choice. Everything in that game is an artistic choice, right? But even with that sex scene, you have to write it out like, hey, there's going to be a sex scene. You then script it very specifically. You choreograph it, choreograph, that's right, choreograph it with the actors. You film it, motion capture. You then have to animate it. That is an artistic choice that has taken several steps to complete. And so I just wonder, there has to be some sort of reason why it was like that, why you didn't cut off. I felt a bit icky, but I sent both of those scenes to Carolyn Coca and just said, hey, do you think you could tell me what it is that I feel discomfort over this, and I can't put my finger on it, but there's something wrong here. And it's hard because she's so disconnected from it because she hasn't played it, and she doesn't know the characters as well, and she gave me some insight as well. I don't know, I guess it's just this question that will never be answered, but no one's talking about it, I feel like. I mean, it's not like I've searched, but on any of the interviews or things, no one brings up this sex scene. And I don't know, is it like taboo, let's not talk about the sex scene? I know that there was some controversy involving, oh, Neil Druckmann did the motion capture for it, which wasn't true. But I just wonder, what is it about that scene that causes me discomfort, or it just feels really weird? I don't understand why it's in there. Why didn't you cut out? Um, yeah, the emotional feel is obviously different, and then externally, I think there's just some weird reason. I don't know. And I mean, this is coming from someone who doesn't really witness sex scenes in video games. I mean, the only other one I can think of, or two or three, I don't know, where however many ones Kratos had, in God of War 1, 2, and 3, original ones. But those are completely different, and their purposes are very different. And I understand why you didn't shy away. But it just seems different. And the second, the Abby and Owen one seems antithetical almost to what Naughty Dog was trying to do with this whole game, and sort of its advocacy and agency, and trying to be positive. It's just very, very bizarre. So I feel like it's something more. So I disagree with Harold. I think there is something more there. I think it's more than just what a human act is, just a sex scene. I think there's something more. And even, if I were to use language on here, because I think language is important. I mean, explicit language, right? Words are very important. And I think back to the memoir, the dream house, or in the dream house, I can't remember what it is, but her language is very particular in what she would use to talk about some of these sexual events that she had with her partner at the time. And I even think, though I might be like, you've got the F word, right? Which is, I feel like that's certainly what I would consider the Abby and Owen situation would be like, if I were to use the F word, compared to Ellie and Dina, which I would consider like, yeah, you could say sex, or like the literal, making love, because there's obviously emotion and fondness in there. Even though Abby and Owen have this past together, I just never felt like it was there. So I don't know. I wish someone could write in and be like, this is what I'm thinking about this. So if you have any thoughts, because you've played it, and were you bothered by it as well? Is it just me? Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know. And I told Harold too that it's interesting because the only previous act that you had seen between Owen and Abby essentially was that kiss, and then he was pushing more, and he said, okay, I'll slow down. I can't remember how it goes, but I thought, oh, is she frightened by intimacy? But then it turned into, no, it's just she's so focused on the revenge. And I wondered, did they ever have sex, and would this be weird if this is the first time that they had sex? So it's just yeah, it's interesting. Okay, well, I guess I'll move on. So it's just a big question mark. I'm still thinking about it, which sounds really weird to say, like, hey, I've been thinking about a sex scene for a long time. And I'm not doing it in like a really deviant sort of way, but just trying to figure out why it was in there, why the artistic choice was made, and yeah, why does it not sit right with me? Um, and why isn't anyone talking about it? It's very interesting. So the final thing I want to talk about, that's a lie. Sorry. The second long thing that I want to talk about, because I do have, just like as a period or an exclamation point, one final thing after this, are the Seraphites. And I felt like I did not comport myself well in the discussion, just because I kept associating Christianity with like perversion, and this is just the perversion of it, and Seraphites are the perversion of, or showing the perversion of. I just kept using that, and I just felt like, oh, I didn't really showcase them well, and to get an insight into me, I'm either empathetic or a coward when it comes to religious talk, especially with or a discussion, especially with people that I don't know what their stance is. So even though I would now consider myself and Harold friends, I haven't asked him what his religious stance is, and I feel bad having discussions or talking about stuff that I don't know what they're thinking. This might make them really uncomfortable, so I should wrap it up really quickly. I think one of the only people I can really have longer discussions with or talk about, and I know that he's okay with it, even though we have different belief systems, is Tom Panarese, because he lets me talk about it. So like that's kind of my one comfort area, which I very much appreciate. So I do want to talk about it a bit more. So you might want to fast forward if you don't want to hear any of this stuff. I'm not going to proselytize you, or evangelize. I will be talking about certain aspects of Christianity. I still really like the Seraphites, and I just want to better explain why I like them and their complicated story, I think. I will I'll talk about Christianity in piecemeal chunks so that it's easier for people who don't like it or don't believe in it to ingest it. But the way that I'll do it might also be like heretical, because I'll be taking pieces out that don't necessarily go. But I think the way I'll do it is like to get you on board, like, yeah, that makes sense. So just be aware, if there's a pastor or father listening, that it will make sense. But hey, Alan Middleton, you email me if I said anything offensive or if you agree or disagree with what I have to say. So the Seraphites. Oh, this was what for 3 hours on my bike ride, I was thinking, how do I even begin this? Let me begin with Christianity then, and then go with the Seraphites. So I'm gonna look at Christ as my center focus, because clearly that is on whom Seraphina, I'm pretty sure is her name, that's how they get the Seraphites, is modeled. So if we look at this guy, let's just focus on him, which there's my first heresy, right? I know some people cannot get on board with this guy because the supernatural aspect of it, right? Not only that he's also God, but he rose from the dead. Okay. And of course there are miracles and things like that. But if you look at this guy, who is, it's interesting. I was going to say charismatic, but I don't know if necessarily I would consider him that. There is something about him that people are drawn to for sure, but he also yells at people. I don't know if is that charisma. I'm not sure. And he needs, some alone time as well. But this guy, all he talks about, all he preaches really is love. He does, of course, tell people when they're in the wrong, and when they have misled others or mistaken what has been told them via the Old Testament. But yeah, it's all about love. And I mean, honestly, this is the call to you guys, just to think about why wouldn't you want to get behind this guy who took the dregs of humanity and welcomed them in his crowd? Why wouldn't you want to be a part of that? And so then we have Seraphina, right? I really hope that's her name, who has a bit of a supernatural element to her, just because some things we're told from a newspaper article that was ripped up, and then from Yara, I think that it might have been Lev, that some things that people couldn't explain were happening, and she was able to protect this town somehow from infection. And all the images of her that you find smiling, people just like really idyllic and special and loving, something about her, caring person. And she's got her own writings. Okay, that seems similar to Christ. And the writings preach love. Okay. Why? Yeah, absolutely. Why would you not want to get behind someone who is, loving, having a loving community and protecting others? Now, there's a bit of a, pardon me, here's where our information stops with Seraphina, because we don't have all of the artifacts. There's a gap that I don't know why she was captured, what was going on, what was her engagement with the wolves. As There's only one article where a soldier was talking to her that wasn't supposed to, and she was talking about something. It's like, wow, it makes a lot of sense. But she ends up getting killed, and of course she's a martyr, which, doesn't that sound similar? But that is when it all falls apart, isn't it? Because religion really, the best part of religion is the guiding force, or the person on whom or around whom everything is set up or surrounds, right? But once that person is taken out, now you have fallible human beings involved, and you don't have the leader to correct other people. And then you might have people that are really close to that leader still trying to disseminate the correct information. But once those people start dying out, it's getting harder and harder. Those people can't be everywhere at once. Now we have different interpretations, and now it just starts to devolve. And that's both the fascinating thing about the Seraphites, just watching this all happen, and the really troubling thing about religion in general, and Christianity. It's hard sometimes to hear about it's hard to hear about the hateful Christians, and it's hard to hear about the people that are hateful towards Christians as well. Just because you don't want to, I mean, my gosh, I wouldn't want someone to come up to me and I identify myself as a Christian, and then they say, "How dare you? You're a terrible human being." I, those people don't represent the larger belief system as a whole. It's just once people get involved in these sorts of things, it's downward trend. But the Seraphites, I felt like, because people, I think, number one, they thought they were a homophobic cult, and I don't know if I could say that's literally true or not. Because they kicked Lev out, but it's sort of more complicated than that. It's like, Lev went against the ways that they had ordained. So I felt like I don't know if I can really use that. And I'm actually trying to get away from using the word homophobia anyways, because I think that we are using it incorrectly. Because that sort of assumes there's a fear of it, which is true for some people, but others, they're hating. I don't know, like meso homosexual, meso queer. I don't know what sort of new term there needs to be, but probably meso, which, the meso means hate, that prefix, misogyny, that sort of thing. Mesotheist, hating God. That, yeah, we just need to change, I think, how it's being referred to. But I lost my train of thought there. Was about the da 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 da. Oh, yeah. Okay. But I felt like they actually treated it respectfully, because people, when they do religious whatever, it's either laughable, clearly a satire, or really making fun of it, or really extreme and terrible. And there's like no in between. There's no sort of truth to it. Yeah. So I felt like the Seraphites You have this person who created this great thing, as a loving and great person to follow. And then inevitably, once that person is gone and people get a hold of it, it starts to, well, go down the wrong track, unfortunately. I feel like that is, in fact, what The Last of Us Part 2 showed. And that was truthful to, my experience. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on Christians. And it's hard because we are not united. Um, and this started way, way, way back, right? It's not a new thing, but just with all these denominations, you've got different interpretations. Where can queers worship? Where can queers not worship? Where can queers be in church leadership? Where can they not? Where can women be in church leadership? Where can they not? Where are tables fenced? And you have to be particular, having given your life to Christ in order to receive communion. Where can you take communion in the hopes that the Holy Spirit leads you to Christ? It's all, my gosh, where can I cut my hair? Where can I not? I don't know. It's so complicated. And we should be the leaders of society. Love, love, love. This, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so disappointing. The onus is on us. Eyes should be on us, but we just fail. We fail all the time. Oh my gosh. Man, but if I could do anything, though, seriously, I'd be like, yeah, Christ is the guy. I implore you to just look him up. I mean, the tough thing about queer Christians is there's just this mixed message, and some youth, because I worked at a Christian school, obviously, and there are some queer students there, and they fear to come out because they feel like they're won't be accepted, number one, by teachers or students. And then, of course, the whole "I'm going to hell" aspect, or that fear. And one student has come out to me, and I'm a good advocate and friend with her now, I think I can say, since she's no longer my student. I told her, listen, do you feel like you would die and go up to the pearly gates, and Jesus would look at you and say, "I'm so sorry, you can't come in here, you're gay"? Absolutely not. Because look at all the people that he had around him. Women, when they didn't really have a voice, whores, tax collectors, which really means nothing, I suppose, now in this context. Like, I'm sure there were queer people surrounding him as well, and he loved them and accepted them for who they were. Why wouldn't you follow that particular guy? Just saying. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now. Just wanted to say that the Seraphites, I think, are pretty cool because they are complicated, and I want to comport myself better and explain why I liked them, and also a bit about Christianity. As you know, I don't really talk about it on here. I think you can get a sense that I am a believer, but I try not to force my viewpoints on anyone. And really, I mean, my comics, do they come up very much? Not too much. So unless the story demands it, I don't talk about it. Final thing I want to say in regards to The Last of Us Part 2 was a big one that I didn't even, I should have had it there. But in Last of Us Part 1, there is a moment where Sam and Ellie are talking, and this is outside of Pittsburgh. And we don't know it now, but Sam has been bitten, and he asks Ellie, he almost confronts her angrily and says, "Aren't you scared of anything?" And we know now, looking back, that he's wrestling with this because he knows he's about to die and become one of these creatures. And she says, "I'm afraid of being by myself. I'm afraid of ending up alone." And man, thinking back to this now and going through Last of Us Part 2, how haunting those words are now. I think to Left Behind, number one, she loses her mom, right? Who died, I think, in childbirth with her, something like that. I don't even know about her dad. I don't think any information is given on her dad. She loses Riley, her first love, and to even think about that, because they were bit at the same time, but to have her friend evolve into whatever that is. Did she end up killing her friend? She never did, because we find out she's immune, right? But to watch that happen to a loved one, did she have to put her down? I don't know. So she's alone there. um Marlene gets killed, though I guess we she doesn't necessarily know that, but she loses Marlene. She witnesses Joel beaten to death right in front of her, and then her decisions, her actions lead her to lose Dina and JJ. And so to just think about those fears that, all of this stuff happening to her. No, well, she's probably still scared of some of the infected. I mean, bloaters can rip your head off. But being bitten again, that's not really going to do anything. But just being alone is her greatest fear. And we see it happen to her. And then how tragic, because passively, it's happening to her. She's not doing anything, it's just happening to her. But then actively, she brings that upon herself. I think that is one of the most tragic things. And I don't know if that's going to continue. Does she go and seek Dina and JJ out? I don't know. But the hope, right, because that's still very low, the hope for her that I see, at least, is that she does not kill Abby. And I think as long as we have that one hope with her, I think that is at least a good starting point. So okay, so I'm done with The Last of Us Part 2 for now, I suppose. I want to briefly mention that Batgirl, the current run, what is this, volume 5? I don't even remember, is ending at issue 50. And I had the news article picked up, pardon me, as I look at my phone, which is funny now because Shag knows that I actually look at my phone a lot when I podcast. Just because I don't know how he found out, but now he's like, oh, are you doing it? And now you can actually see. Let's see here. Well, this is from what? CBR? Yeah, comicbook.com. There you go. This is what it says. A staple of DC's rebirth publishing line, the Batgirl comic series is set to officially conclude later this year. DC Comics confirmed the announcement in their October 2020 solicitations, revealing that Batgirl 50 will be the final issue in the series. Writer Cecil Castellucci confirmed the news on Twitter, revealing that this ending has been planned. She wrote, "It's been announced that 50 is the series finale of Batgirl. I want to say that end has been in the works for a long time. It was planned because there were other things upcoming that didn't happen. Fiercely proud of bringing Babs to here. Meanwhile, 47 is out next week. The oversized issue," that's the end of her quote. "The oversized issue will be released on October 27th and is priced at $5.99. Featuring art by Emanuela Lupacchino, Marguerite Savage, and Anike. The issue's main cover will be by Josh Middleton, with a variant cover by the Dodsons, Terry Dodson and Rachel Dodson, which we know that will be beautiful. This marks the second major series that has been confirmed to be ending by DC Comics, as Harley Quinn will also conclude with issue 75 later this year. It's unclear if both of these comics will reboot with new creative teams right after ending, but the DC Fandom digital event is, I don't even know what that is set to kick off in August and could come with new comic announcements. DC describes Fandom, I should say, there we go, as having new announcements from WB Games, film and TV and comics, and an unprecedented opportunity to hear from the casts and creators behind your favorite feature films and TV series. The solicit, I wonder if I can here's the image. Does this work? You won't be able to see it. Never mind. The solicit says series finale. All good things must come to an end. Yikes. Got some things to say about that. As we wrap up this run of Batgirl with one final oversized celebratory issue, in the aftermath of Joker War, Gotham is left in pieces that need to be picked up by Barbara and Alejo's team. But is Gotham a city worth saving anymore? And how much longer does our girl have it in her to keep fighting for it as Batgirl? Then, if Barbara is ever to give her relationship with Jason a chance, she knows she has to face him and finally make amends with the act that crippled him. Okay, well, I've got mixed feelings. Feeling number one is good riddance. Listeners of the show, you know that I've not been enjoying this particular run, and we're about to hit a low. There's the bait, right? The clickbait in part two, 8 minutes in, maybe that's my guess. That's future Stella. Future Stella is guessing. So good riddance, honestly. The bad thing is though that she is a female staple, and I'm afraid that like Cassandra, like Stephanie, because I think they're going away as well with well, Cassandra is definitely with Outsiders canceled. Without her there, losing, you lose that presence of an important female character in DC Comics, and just feel like gone. Could she be forgotten, kind of thing? It's hard to forget Wonder Woman. I think Wonder Woman has something that Barbara doesn't. Um, yeah, I don't know. Donovan believes that maybe sort of they're cleaning house, cleaning up a bit with Didio's departure, and maybe it'll start again. And I mean, honestly, if they do that, I hope to see Barbara, but I also hope that it's actually good, that it's written by someone who understands the character. People have been crying out Batgirls, Team Batgirls. Yeah, having that, a legacy book in the sense of having all of these females, and even non-females. Come on, let's bring in non-females, non-cisgendered characters would be great, but having a league of Batgirls would be amazing, and I feel like it's time. Uh, yeah, so two different minds. I think we lose something important in losing that book, but I also feel like it's not been good. And I have no idea what the sales are. I'm sure they've been lacking, but something needs to change. And I've not written anything professionally besides, I suppose, a thesis on Batgirl as the heroine's journey, or Barbara Gordon's heroine's journey, but I feel like I could write a good Barbara Gordon comic book. But I don't think DC Comics is going to come and knock on my door anytime soon. So there we go. Okie dokie. Well, we are now done with whatever that was. It's under the introduction subtitle thing of my document, but here we are. This is the Find Your Joy segment, which is Shag's mac and cheese of comfort and joy. What have I been doing to find joy in these sometimes unjoyful times? I've been watching She-Ra and the Princesses of Power on Netflix. It's great. It's so great that it tries my self-control from time to time, in that I'm watching multiple episodes without being able to stop. It is also super diverse, and in a very positive way, one of the queerest things that I've ever seen, and I love it. And it's treated so well that it's just like, yeah, that character happens to be queer. Yeah, those two happen to be together. Like, no attention is put on them. I do have a question though about Bo's dads, because they have 13 children, and I just wondered, did you have one surrogate or 13 surrogates? So I do have a question about that. Multiple ships. One ship that I feel like I'm supposed to ship, but I do not, is Horak and Entrapta. It's very bizarre. I'm not sure about that. Maybe a friendship ship, but it's very weird. But I do highly recommend it. Netflix. And I'm a fan of AJ Mike Chalka, I don't know, of Ali and AJ, and she plays Katra, and so that's been fun to hear her as well. Hey, Adora. Okay, now we're done. We're gonna get into some comic reviews. Isn't that weird, people? Um, yeah, okay. I'll say what I was about to say later on. This is gonna be a quick one, I feel. I don't have too much to talk about these particular episodes. It's not really a trash episode or a catch-up episode as I sometimes have, but there's no Birds of Prey and there's no Batgirl. So we're just talking about some random things to a certain extent, but I am gonna call out Dawn angrily a couple of points, so just be aware of that. So first up, we have Superboy number 85, Silent but Deadly. like a fart. April 2001 is its cover date. Writer Joe Kelly, penciler Pascal Ferry, inker Keith Champagne, and colorist Jason Wright, and Digital Chameleon. Superboy is looking for some company to talk to and has decided to visit Robin in Gotham City. While continuously pestering his young Justice teammate, Superboy and Robin run into Batgirl, who is fighting a group of sodium-filled undead. After defeating them together, Robin contacts Batman, but before he can turn around again, Batgirl and Superboy are gone. Cassandra found a clue and just grabbed Connell to come with her to investigate. Superboy and Batgirl find a laboratory which might be the origin of The Walking Dead. Indeed, it belongs to a man calling himself Dr. Sin, and he is able to take both heroes captive. Although Dr. Sin finds their special physique very interesting, he wants to drown them. Batgirl and Superboy, that was kind of weird. Batgirl and Superboy are able to escape the death trap, but Dr. Sin is already gone. Instead, they are confronted by Batman and Robin. The Dark Knight intends to punish... Oh, my heavens! To punish Batgirl? No, because she's not allowed to come close to metahumans. You should be fired, Cassandra Cain, and I'm pretty sure this is like the third time you should be fired. So calling you out, Don, to explain that. Not knowing what he might get himself into, Superboy is defending Batgirl and asks for one half of her punishment. How nice. So it's good to know that Batjerk, he doesn't just do it privately. He does it in front of other people as well. Yeah, so Batgirl, she's not fired, because I don't know how you can half fire her and half fire Superboy. But she does disobey Batman, and so she's gotten like 2 more chances than Hunter Scott and Stephanie Brown. So explain that, Donovan. Sorry, I just thought of something that I was going to say, and then I thought maybe that would be going too far. So I've decided not to say it. Filter. Okay. The opening, Superboy acting like Batman and saying chum and later little chum or little buddy is pretty funny. And then this is the first meeting of Superboy and Batgirl, but it won't be the last. If I remember correctly, they go on a date, kind of, in her series. It's been a while. Yeah, so I think Oracle doesn't even appear in this, so thank you, Excel document that lied to me. Her name pops up. Robin does talk to her, but her face doesn't appear, but Batgirl's in it, so I guess it works out. Okay, we're moving on to a 3-part Batman story. And again, I won't talk too much about it, but I will cover it. And, Oracle does pop up actually a great deal in here. So it's probably good that I'm covering it. Thank you to the Wikia for synopses for the first 2 parts and the third one. It was interesting because the first part was like pretty sizable. Second part was a paragraph, and then third part, nothing. So I had to create that on my own. Also, thank you to the Wikia for the Superboy synopsis. The less work I have to do on this podcast is better. So here we go. They matches Malone trilogy. Batman 588 closed before striking Act 1. April 2001, writer Brian K. Vaughan, penciler Scott McDaniel, inker Carl Story, and colorist Roberta Tews. And I believe those credits remain for the entire story, so I won't say it again. The Batman walks into a CD bar asking about a shipment of armor-piercing cop killer bullets coming into Gotham City. Seeing Matches Malone at the end of the bar, he walks over, picks him up by the scruff, and demands information. Matches refuses and spits in his face, and it's yellow, so it must be a loogie. And Batman throws him out of the window, threatens the room again, and leaves. Shortly afterwards, Scarface offers Matches a place on the team he's assembling that night to pull the score previously in question, which Matches graciously accepts. After Matches leaves, the Batmobile swings around and picks him up. Dick Grayson is driving, still in the Batman costume from before, and Bruce takes off his Matches Malone disguise and grabs the wheel. Their attempt to reestablish Matches' credibility had been a success, and they prepare for the night's activities. On the railroad line where the ventriloquist and his crew are taking the incoming train shipment, Batman and Nightwing ambush them. They are successful in preventing the smuggling operation, but the ventriloquist is able to escape. Naturally, particularly as the operation had been kept relatively secret and Matches Malone was the only one to bail. Scarface makes the conclusion that Matches is snitching to the Batman. Later that evening in the cave, Bruce and Dick receive a disturbing phone call from Oracle. It seems that Matches Malone has just been shot. Batman 589 closed before striking Act 2. May 2001 is the cover date. Matches Malone is dead, and Batman is none too happy about this. It had generally been assumed that Malone was simply an assumed ID, but as Batman tells Nightwing, there really was a Malone many years ago, one of a pair of arsonist brothers. When his brother Carver died, possibly at his hands, Matches committed suicide and Batman took over his identity. However, Malone had faked his death and took on another life back home in Hoboken. When he heard about the possible stool pigeon with his name, he decided it was time to come back to Gotham, only to find himself in serious trouble with Scarface. Nightwing is worried about Batman as he tells Oracle that Batman made a promise to Matches to kill the man responsible for killing Matches. Sounds confusing. And the conclusion is Batman 590, closed before striking, Act 3, June 2001 is the cover date. Scarface and the ventriloquist are at a theater as Batman interrogates Scarface's men for their location at a newspaper printing factory. He's about to use what looks to be lethal means when Nightwing arrives preventing this, even though Batman says he had it handled. Nightwing is shaken up and goes to the clock tower to talk to Babs. Alan, my chief hairstylist or just chief stylist correspondent, I want to let you know that it is longer hair in a ponytail with a couple of strands coming down from the front. They spar, because it's her workout time, while talking, bringing up the fact that Batman has potentially gone native and accepted the role of Matches too well or too much. Babs asks whether it is an identity crisis and if it is also happening with Dick because of all of his different identities floating around, like a cop and leader of the Titans and things like that. He says that with help from friends like Babs, he stays grounded, and then he throws back her many identities as well, perhaps going too far because she gets a little rattled and upset, but she gets the point. The difference is Batman hardly has anyone now. Whose fault is that, Bat Jerk? Meanwhile, Bruce takes $50,000 out of an account. Dick catches him, presumably to buy info on Scarface, and he returns as Matches. He is in Bruce. Bruce returns as Matches, telling people that he healed. Oracle helps trace a call to a theater that is made in a bar that Matches is in. And Batman arrives at this theater and attacks Scarface, then suddenly transforms into Matches, which is scarcely to be believed, but it is Batman. He's about to kill, I'm serious, he's about to kill when he sees the message from Carver on Matches' matchbook. Which was kind of weird that he took it, but he has it. And Carver originally gave this to Matches. Now Batman has it as Matches. Yeah. But the message is, remember who you are. He kills people. He kills, but he only kills Scarface. Nightwing later meets up with Batman, asking if he killed, and both of them regretting the fact that he even had to ask. Batman explains that his consciousness was so divided that he didn't realize the theater was the same one where he saw the Mask of Zorro with his parents. Dick asks if Bruce Wayne died that night as well. There's a pause, and Batman says he doesn't know. Batman will continue to be Matches, not only to get info, but to also help redeem Matches as well. Batman trusts Dick will help him if he loses his way again. And that is the trilogy there. And I'm assuming the close before striking is this idea, since it does, the climax of everything takes place at this theater. When you strike, that usually happens at the end of a run, and it means that you tear everything down, which with my showmen on boats, we haven't struck yet, which actually kind of leaves me with some hope that we could do a couple more shows, but I don't know. But yeah, everyone helps take down the set in preparation for whatever the next show is. So the close before striking is interesting, just that I guess it's sudden. This is actually, that literally happened. Two men on boats. We closed before striking. So, because the idea is you close and then that night you would strike. So, usually a long last night. Let me talk a bit about the covers. Hopefully, my Zoom doesn't destroy itself. 588. And for people who are going to watch part 2, I think I'm going to do some screen sharing, but I want to save it because I know YouTube is particular, even though I feel like this is what, free use or fair use. Anyways, so the first, I like this cover series. Actually, it's really fun. I shouldn't say fun. I feel like designed really well. You've got two faces, and Matches Malone is highlighted and more realistic, and then Batman's kind of like scratched out, or like hatching makes with red makes the Batman, so you can kind of see this dual personality. With 589, you have Batman holding up the face of Matches, like it's more humanistic than just a mask, but you can kind of tell that's a mask. And then I'd say like the weakest of the three, but still powerful, is in 590, where you have Matches looking to the mirror, and then within that mirror you've got that red hatching of Batman, the Batman face looking back. So I would say a great series there. I I like that we get to see the fallibility of Batman, especially in the beginning of his career. I feel like he is always held up in such a high regard that he doesn't make mistakes, and he was great all along. He's always been great. He always will be great. And actually, no, he made mistakes when he started out. He was trying to take on these different guises, and people quickly realized, who it was. They ripped open his shirt for a wire, and his Batman suit was there. He seemed like a narc. It seemed like he was killed multiple times because people were getting rid of these fake identities by doing whatever, throwing them in water. And so he learned from everything, which is great. But I love seeing that no, he was never always perfect. But then it does bring it to question the fact that, look at how many mistakes you made. They were on you, so you didn't bring anyone else into danger. But my gosh, give some of these, up and comers a bit of a break as well when they're trying different things out, and they make slip ups as well. So, the strain on his psyche. I think this was really one of the most interesting parts of this. Is just, I think we really get to see what it is like to be Batman, and not just Batman, but all these different identities and how that can wear on you. And this is a real world problem as well, right? Because it's Batman and Matches, and him like really taking on this persona as Matches, and someone, even in the beginning, I can't remember who. Well, I know Oracle, on the call with Oracle, he's talking and she's like, Batman, is that you? Like, she couldn't even tell. And with the discussion with Oracle and Nightwing, and she's going through all these different things, it's not just literal identities of Batman and Matches, but you also have these identities of, you know, um, father, sister, that sort of thing, or friend or colleague. So with Nightwing, when she's talking about you're a cop, you were a leader, you're a former Robin, you're Nightwing, you're all these competing identities that really wears on you. And how do you act in these certain situations? And that's certainly something that I also struggle with, right? Because when you're in different groups, you act in a certain way. And I struggle with, like, oh man, who is the authentic Stella? Why can't I be authentically Stella with all of these groups? Why do I have to be different? Why do I act different with Donovan and Josh? And I feel like that's really close to my true self than I would maybe like at church, or with my parents or something like that. And to a certain extent, you have to read the room, and I don't, man alive. It's something I'm still working through. I don't know if I could best do it, but sometimes I feel authentic. And I did get into a debate or a discussion with some people at school of, is that living authentically? What does that exactly mean? Is it okay that you have different personalities with different, to that extent? But like, this shows it strains your emotional and mental capacities, I think. And then you sort of get fed up when maybe your identity or your mask slips, and maybe something pokes through and someone doesn't accept you for that, and that's hard, right? So I mean, for me, I do have to read the room for sure and figure out like how much can somebody take. And so, you know, I feel like I'll use Carolyn Coca as an example. I feel a bit bad about it, but I think it's okay. So, like initially, I like that was just a professional relationship. I just really respect her. I wanted to keep it in that sort of vein. And now I just feel like we're legitimately friends. And also I've kind of thrown her in the deep end with with my personality. And I think that she's swimming okay in there. But just like you just have to figure out like, what's this person like? Feed them a couple jokes. For me anyways, are they receiving that well? Can I be a bit more of, my actual self? um is this different with Batman? I mean, ugh, I don't think he's doing the joke thing, but it's again all these split ideas and actions and personalities, and how do they come together? And of course that is going to cause some sort of strain. So I really liked that, and I resonated with that particular part of the storyline. Okay. Donovan Morgan Grant the first. I am calling you out because Batman is responsible for Match's death. Nightwing calls him out on that. Batman agrees. Yes, yes, yes. Excuse me? Isn't this the whole reason why Huntress got the boot? Because she was responsible for some people dying? Give me a break. Double standard. Donovan Morgan Grant the first. You need to respond to this, and I want answers. So, whew, I love that Nightwing is moral compass. It absolutely makes sense. I think Barbara is also, but she pushes harder, and I think she's more like a reactionary, and that something happens and she'll shouldn't say snap because I don't want her to get this like bitchy persona. But like she'll go after someone, whereas Nightwing, I think, is very like, I mean, there's a reason why Batman brought Nightwing with him when he went to talk to Huntress. I think he's a good middleman. So I did like that. And then, yeah, the discussion with Barbara I thought was really well done. I think I have this one if I can pull it up and read it. Pardon me. Oh no, it might have been the middle one. Oh no, let's see here. 590? Is it this one? Yeah. Yeah, talking about it. Oh man. Well, first of all, he doesn't even want to fight with her. He just wants to talk. Babs, it's Bruce. He's not himself. Um, isn't that funny? Yeah. So what's up? Does Bruce still feel responsible for Match's death? She says something like, "You'll fight handicapped." I'm not up to sparring this morning. You'll fight handicapped. Deal with it. I love that. Um, brings up Sherlock Holmes. Um, and his, fallibility as well because he was a heroin addict. And then, yeah, just holding him accountable, right? I mean, Officer Grayson, Nightwing, Bruce's ward, leader of the Titans, how do you stay grounded with the help of friends like you, Babs? Or is it Barbara Oracle? Maybe it's still bad. I get the point. And then she rolls off. Um, and then, yeah, that he doesn't have anyone. Which is, I mean, that really is Bruce's fault. He pushed people away, and Alfred's still gone. Good on you, Alfred, for sticking to your guns. Man, but I liked that discussion between the two of them. Barbara brings up good points, but I like that Nightwing can push back as well, and I think you do get a sense of, sometimes some of these things feel uncomfortable for Barbara for sure. So, my true confession here, I've already confessed so much in this actual episode, which is funny. I Man, when I was reading this and then I went back on my Excel document and I was looking and I texted Donovan and said, what's the next arc of Batgirl, just so I could prepare. And he said the next one running through is like the Shiva and it's 14 through 25. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I've got to do all those. And he's like, oh, just I'll look at which ones are important. And I texted him and I said, I'm tired. I'm tired. And I was just trying to figure out, is this a worthwhile story or not? Because I'm just looking at all of these things that Oracle is popping up in. And I don't ever want this to be toil or, a negative task. But I am glad that I did this one because I do think it's a worthwhile storyline. And whenever Batman messes up or bad things happen, I like to point out to people like Donovan, who hold him up so highly, that, hey, he also makes mistakes. Yeah, I feel like DC Comics should hire me just to be an advocate for some of their characters and be like, hey, this is happening. Do you realize you're doing this? That's not good. But anyways, I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 matches. Not a huge Oracle appearance, but it's worthwhile where she is and the discussions that she has and the points that she brings up, obviously, as they resonated with me. Hey, no listener emails. What's happening, people? You need to write your emails to me. Remember, you can send in backroll to oracle@gmail.com. I've asked so many questions so far. Last of Us, the sex scene. You could actually go on YouTube. Actually, I kind of feel icky saying this, but just say Dina and Ellie kiss, and then Owen and Abby, I don't even know, scene. You'll probably be able to find it. It's long. That one's longer because you do need the context of why he's moping around. That's another thing. I didn't feel connected to him, but also that whole scene, even though you should feel empathy, you also like there's a pregnant girl, which I guess out of context you wouldn't know, but she says like Abby says, "What about Mel?" And then he's like, "She'll be fine," because he's about to leave her. So that doesn't ingratiate himself, anyways. So, anyways, the sex scenes I've got a question about. Alan, specifically, need you to write in to tell me how I did on that Christian thought business. And is that it? I guess that's it. Okay, well, Donovan has a lot to account for. I'm going to take a break, and part 2, we'll see if 8 minutes is true. Can tell past Stella if that's true or not. When I come back, I am going to be talking Backroll 46/98/201 and Batgirl 47 slash 99/202. But first, Zaius's Radio Hour featuring Stay Gold by BTS.